Three things world-famous evangelist Billy Graham said about the end times. Now, people associate Graham with evangelism, and rightly so, but what they likely don't know is that nearly every one of Graham's evangelistic sermons began with the destruction and punishment of the wicked that happens upon the return of Jesus. There is a direct link between eschatology and evangelism. That's what we're talking about today, and we're starting right now. Having listened to many Billy Graham sermons, I've discovered that he had a favorite end-time account, and even a favorite end-time verse. And that is the first thing we're going to discuss today. And that favorite end-time verse is one of the shortest verses in the Bible, just 3 words. Remember Lot's wife. And his favorite end-time account is Luke 17, in which Jesus compares his return to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. If you search for Graham's sermons, you will find him repeatedly coming back to this account time and time again, and especially to the verse, Remember Lot's wife. Let's take a brief look at that passage. Just as it was in the days of Lot, they were eating and drinking, buying and selling, planting and building. But on the day when Lot went out from Sodom, fire and sulfur rained from heaven and destroyed them all. So it will be on the day when the Son of Man is revealed. On that day, let the one who is on the housetop with his goods in his house not come down to take them away, and likewise, let the one who is in the field not turn back. Remember Lot's wife. There it is. Remember Lot's wife, a direct command from our Lord. This was Graham's go-to passage in many sermons, and for good reason. Fire and brimstone preaching has currently gone out of style, but it was Jesus' mainstay as well as Graham's. The consequences of a worldly lifestyle are a huge motivating factor in many making the decision to follow Christ. I know that my mentor and friend Joel Richardson often tells his community it was a sermon just like this that brought him to Christ initially, and probably that's true for many of you as well. So the first takeaway is that fire and brimstone teaching works in order to allow the Spirit to save the lost and to encourage the saved to reach out to the lost. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is a pretty horrific fate. Graham's typical sermon would describe how Abraham's nephew Lot made a conscious choice to move close to Sodom when he and Abraham separated. Then Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we're kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, then I will go to the right, or if you take the right hand, then I will go to the left." Graham always pointed out that Lot could have chosen to live anywhere, but Lot chose the financially attractive spot. And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord. Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. Graham would then compare those living in our Western democracies to Lot, living in proximity to great wealth, but also to great sin, and not doing anything about the latter. In Sodom, we know Lot did very little to reverse the culture because God promised Abraham to not destroy Sodom if only 10 righteous people could be found. But only 3 people, Lot and his 2 daughters, escaped. But 4 people walked out of Sodom that day: Lot, his daughters, and Lot's wife. And this is where Graham would always interject his favorite end-time verse, Remember Lot's wife. There is a risk of not being protected upon Jesus' return, of not going in the rapture. The angels of God escorted all 4 of them. This represents the day of the rapture when the angels come for us. But Lot's wife looked back on the lifestyle she loved and probably on the family that she left behind in the city. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. The story of Lot and his family is an analogy of the rapture, and in this analogy they represent the churchgoers of today. Lot's wife reminds us that some churchgoers aren't going to be taken. That's why Jesus told his followers to remember Lot's wife. He didn't recommend remembering the townspeople or even the rest of Lot's family who laughed at him when he warned them judgment was coming. Jesus warned us about Lot's wife, because some of his followers will be analogous to her, falling away at the very last minute. We need to love God more than our attraction to the riches and pleasures of this worldly system. Now, the second thing Billy Graham said about end times that is crucial to us today is that God relents sending final judgment when there is still a remnant of his people left. Unless the Lord of hosts had left unto us a very small remnant, we should have been as Sodom, we should have been as Gomorrah. Drawing on the other biblical analogy in Luke 17, the account of Noah, Graham had this to say, quote, "It was a world that was threatened by the judgment of God, but in the middle of all that, there stood one man. God had said that with all the sin and violence and corruption, he was going to destroy the world, but he didn't do it because of one man who was going against the tide of that day. His name was Noah." End of quote. As we mentioned previously, Abraham asked God if he would relent if there were 10 righteous left in Sodom, and God said he would. Graham additionally added, quote, "It is owing entirely to the mercy of God that we are not like Sodom right now, and that God will not entirely destroy us while a righteous remnant remains, but someday he will take the remnant, and then judgment falls." End of quote. So another major teaching point of Billy Graham was the protective influence of believers on the world around them. A third point about end times that Graham made in every sermon he preached was that despite the difficulty prior to it, the return of Jesus is a wonderful, amazing thing that all Christians should be looking forward to and working toward, not fearing. Quote, "The second coming of Christ will be so revolutionary that it will change every aspect of life on the planet. Christ will reign in righteousness. Disease will be arrested. Death will be modified. War will be abolished. Nature will be changed. Man will live as it was originally intended he should live." End of quote. We can all learn from Billy Graham. Although we might not speak to tens of thousands in stadiums, the basic framework of his message is that judgment is coming, God is delaying so a remnant will be formed, and the reward of believers will be awesome, should frame our spiritual conversations with others. But I bet you're still thinking about the discussion we just had about Lot's wife, how close she got to safety. The angels were already escorting her. Yet she missed out because she did not endure till the very end. Click right here to keep watching and learn what might have motivated Lot's wife to make that terrible decision and what we can learn from her to avoid it today. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.